Hi, this is Andre. I'm going to do another analysis of a video performance I recently did with John Schroeder and Ross Guerin, otherwise known as the Sheriffs of Schroedingham. Thank you very much to Mark Oswald for commissioning this one. So John and Ross and I got together recently and recorded a couple of live performance tracks in studio. One of them was a cover of Fire on the Bayou, which I just did a tutorial video for very recently. This track is called Crisco Sid, and it's actually an original track that the three of us cooked up a couple of years ago. It originally appeared on an album the Sheriffs put out called Going to the Sun, and it had never actually been performed live before this. It was kind of pieced together in the studio using some of my EDP loops as a foundation, and then Ross and John built an actual composition around it. And when we were talking about getting together to do a couple of performances for a video, one of the things we thought would be fun would be to actually take Crisco Sid, which was originally just a studio creation, and actually turn it into a live performance thing. So we came up with the arrangement that you're about to see here. One of the interesting details that you can really notice at the very beginning is that not only were Ross and I synchronizing our two EDPs using Brother Sync, but at the very beginning I was also controlling both of the EDPs at the same time. So I was using my regular Behringer MIDI foot pedal. I was running the Behringer into a MIDI splitter box, and then the splitter box was sending the same commands out to my Echoplex Digital Pro and Ross's EDP as well. And if you look closely at the front of Ross's EDP at the very beginning, you can see that the functions that I'm sending are being shown on his front panel display. And we began the performance using a technique that I use a lot. It's one of my cliches, but it's also one of my favorite techniques. And the idea is to start with an empty loop and then use the SUS Unrounded Multiply function and just tap the button controlling SUS Unrounded Multiply so that you can get a loop length that's just a few milliseconds long. So you can start off with these extremely short loops, and then using various functions like SUS Insert and SUS Replace, you can really start getting a very complex sound very quickly. And if you listen closely, especially with headphones, you'll be able to hear that those granular functions that I was applying were also affecting Ross's harmonica as he was playing it into his own EDP. So it was the same functions, but because we were playing different input instruments into different EDPs, you end up with a much more complex texture with two separate loops happening, even though both of those loops have the same millisecond-long edits and microscopic changes being done to them. So let's check it out. So SUS Unrounded Multiply, and now SUS Replace and SUS Insert to build up and develop what was a very short loop, reverse. And now what's about to happen is that I'm going to hold down the SUS Unrounded Multiply while playing a drum hit on the guitar. And I'm going to hold down the Unrounded Multiply pedal for about 2 beats worth of what's going to be the new rhythm. So I'm basically imposing a completely different tempo and a completely different rhythm onto the loop using SUS Unrounded Multiply. This is something I do all the time. So this is a total cliche for me, but it's a good cliche and I like the sound of it. So we're about to do that, and that was the SUS Unrounded Multiply that set up the initial loop. I played a snare sound while I was holding down the pedal, then I overdubbed a kick drum shortly thereafter. Now I'm switching MIDI pedal banks to access a different bank that's designed to switch back and forth between loops quickly. Now I'm adjusting the MIDI splitter box so that Ross is not getting commands anymore. 2, 3, 4, loop 2. And close loop 2. So I overdubbed that little tritony bluesy riff. We're still in loop 2 because that tritone riff is happening. I'm playing live bass. The bass sound is coming through a combination of the neck pickup on the Reverend guitar and using an octave down model in the Vox Tone Lab that I'm playing through. I'm playing the bass line live, so the loop is just the percussion part that's happening underneath. 2, 3, 4, loop 1. This is a quick little interlude. That's my really dorky James Jamerson impression. Now we're back to loop 2. You can hear the tritone riff is back in there that I overdubbed previously. Now we're about to go back to loop 1 and go into the Echoplex solo. So loop 1, now I have to switch down 1 bank and now hit the half speed button right there. So this is the beginning of the EDP solo proper. So what I'm doing here is a combination of overdubbing stuff and replace and a bit of reverse. We're still in loop 1, although by this point it's now pretty unrecognizable from the main loop that we were using in the first part of the song. But we're not going back to that section, so there's no problem with getting rid of the old content in that loop. So this is still in half speed, doing various stuff with overdub and replace. And now we're back in full speed, so everything is twice as fast and an octave higher than I was just playing it. So I'm about to bust out one of my secret weapon tricks, and it involves taking a loop, in this case it's on loop 1, copying it into another loop location, which in this case is going to be loop 4. And then while I'm in loop 4, using a SUS Unrounded Multiply to shorten the loop down to a really, really short length. If you just tap the button, you can turn the loop into just a few milliseconds long. And then, after you've got that very short millisecond long loop glitching away, you can switch back to loop 1, which still has the original copy of the loop. So it's basically take loop 1, copy it into loop 4. While you're still in loop 4, use SUS Unrounded Multiply to get it really incredibly short and glitchy and grainy, and then switch back to loop 1 where the original loop is still stored. And it's basically a way of getting a kind of glitch fill kind of sound. I call it my fake Squarepusher effect. So here we go. Now the glitch solo is over, so now I'm overdubbing and replacing. I'm basically evolving the loop using a combination of overdub and replace. I still have the octave effect on the tone lab, or I did. I think I just switched it off. Now overdubbing some kick drum sounds. This was basically conceptualized as the EDM Riser part of the EDP solo. And here comes a remultiply. And remultiply. And that shortens the loop length. And for the climax of the EDM Riser section, I'm going to be using the SUS Unrounded Multiply pedal again to gradually get the loop shorter and shorter and climax that section with some very short granular stuff before switching back to loop 1, which is the beginning of John's guitar solo. Here we go. So now we're back at loop 1. This is where we left loop 1 off. To start with, I'm playing a little more live bass here at the beginning of the guitar solo. And at some point in here, I overdubbed the bass part. I might have already done it by now. I think so. And now that the bass has been overdubbed into the loop, what I'm going to start doing for the coda of the song is scaling feedback down and overdubbing new layers on top. This is a total classic old school live looping technique. And unfortunately, it's one that you can't do on a lot of modern loopers because they don't have feedback or decay. Old man yelling at the cloud, shaking his fist, get off my lawn, etc. But you can hear now that the drum part is getting quieter because feedback has been scaled back, and as the older layers are decaying, I'm overdubbing new stuff on top, which is a lot more transparent in texture. You know, it's mainly a lot of artificial harmonic stuff sitting on a C Mixolydian kind of sound. Still scaling the stuff back with feedback. I think I'm using one of the expression pedals on the Behringer to bring feedback down manually. And this is really nice. If you listen closely, you can hear that Ross's harmonica loop from the very beginning is still intact. And there it goes. So as I mentioned in the previous video analyzing the other tune I did with Ross and John, a lot of moving parts, a lot of balls in the air to keep juggling and to keep my eye on. So this type of thing is actually quite challenging for me, and I'm not complaining because I love doing this sort of thing and I really enjoy being able to do it with other musicians. But it also means that I really have to spend some time doing my homework and being very particular about how I'm going to use certain functions, when I'm going to use them, and basically make sure that I'm adhering to the structure that we decide on. The arrangement for Crisco Sid was a little more open-ended, so we definitely had specific points that we knew we were going to hit, and we certainly had specific lengths of time and numbers of bars that they were going to happen in, but there were also some areas that were not that clearly defined, and we were just going to see what happens. So from my point of view, it's a little harder to be objective about whether or not I did my job well. With something like Fire on the Bayou, because it was much more meticulously arranged and there were more specific things that had to happen at particular times, I can be a little more objective, saying, okay, I hit these parts at the times they were supposed to happen, so therefore I was successful. With Crisco Sid, it was more open open-ended, still very arranged in a lot of ways, but also with a lot of spots left open to kind of see what would happen. So both of the tunes were really challenging for me, but it's the best possible kind of challenge to have, and I really enjoy doing this sort of thing. And I'm really grateful to John and Ross for the invitation to make music with them, and for being great supporters and great friends of mine for several years now. So this has been a commentary analysis of the live performance version of Crisco Sid as performed by myself with the Sheriffs of Schroedingham. Thank you again very much to Mark Oswald for commissioning this video, and thank you everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I never take it for granted. I am always grateful for your eyes and ears. I will talk to you very soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.